What up, guys? Welcome to the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. Today, we're going to talk to a friend of mine, AJ Clingerman. We're going to talk about Jiu-Jitsu. In particular, we'll talk about some of the challenges and some of the unique situations that women have in Jiu-Jitsu. Now, just so we're clear, because I know, it's so interesting when whenever you talk about anything related to like one sex or the other. It's like, you talk about, say, unique situation about women, and then you instantly think about maybe you're taking away from men, right? And it's not the case. There's a really good book I read recently, and it's called Of Boys and Men. And it's written by a guy. It's talking about some of the unique challenges that men have. By no means is it like anti-woman. Like the guy's like clearly, if you read it, like very much, he's not like a crazy, bro manosphere guy, right? He comes at it at a pretty like sort of logical situation. And his whole thing was, you can talk about, say, obstacles men have, and you can still sort of say that women need to have like equal rights and opportunities, right? You can hold two different ideas in your mind. Not that anything that we say on this podcast today is very controversial. I think it's all pretty straightforward. But I just share that with you because it's like sometimes I'll get messages from people as we talk about on the podcast. Someone's like, Chewy's being a white knight. Like, I'm not being a white knight. Like, this is just normal, like, behavioral stuff, right? Like, by no means, and I don't think many of you guys, because most of you guys that listen are pretty normal people, but sometimes with the internet being what it is today, it sort of conditions people to just look at everything from these binary like terms and to be very like adversarial anytime something, whatever. You guys get the idea. Like I said, nothing that we talk about in this podcast is very controversial. But AJ shares some unique perspectives from being a woman. She has a really cool women's only camp for jiu-jitsu that she does called Role Models. She'll talk about it and explain it, and grew that from 50 women at a camp to like over 250 women, which is, it's pretty wild, pretty big. And we'll talk about a bunch of different other stuff. And again, hopefully you guys enjoy it. Hope you guys get something from it. And thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. If you guys haven't checked them out before, I encourage you to try it. Later on in the podcast, we talk about this idea of managing stress, right? When you think about, a lot of times people think about, say, like training stress. So for instance, lifting weights, running, jiu-jitsu, and we really sort of keep an eye on those things. But a lot of times people don't think about a lot of other stuff. For instance, like the stress that alcohol puts on you, the stress that eating bad food puts on you. I would tell you that and then even bad sleep. I could tell you that from doing like HRV measurements and doing a bunch of other stuff, even measuring my like heart rate and things of that nature and how it's affected. I can train really hard. And if I get a good night's rest, I eat enough food and, all that stuff, I'm usually good the next day. But I definitely feel a bad negative effect, and my measurements and metrics will show it if, I don't eat so well, maybe drink a little too much, which barely ever happens, but even just a little bit too much, don't eat enough food, don't sleep right. Or if I had like a really, really stressful day in relation to, say, life stuff, the next day I'll wake up and everything's screwed up, right? And so it's one of those things where managing stress is really useful. And there's, a number of different things that you can do, like literally just take recovery days. Like, just don't do anything, like, and recover and enjoy an off day and recover from it. But there are some other supplements and stuff like that you can take, one of which is being CBD. Again, there's a lot of things you simply just can't say because of FDA regulations, but look up CBD, check it out for yourself. I like using CBD to support my sleep cycles because, again, the number one thing that we have to recover in our body is sleep. And the better our sleep is, the better that we're going to recover. And they have supplements like their CBN supplement called Stay Asleep, which is a little different than CBD, but again, it's formulated to help support your sleep cycles. And if you guys want to check them out, go to their website, charlottesweb.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu30 for 30% off the order at checkout if you want to save 30% on the product. Also, guys, epicrollbjj.com. The other day I was looking at one of my students, and he had on an Epic Roll rash guard. I was like, hey bro, it's like, did you get that from Epic Roll? Did you how'd you hear about it? He said, I was listening to the podcast, and he got it. Yeah. So I share with you guys, my students, a lot of the stuff that you guys hear on the podcast, my students are listening to this. So I know that sometimes there's a lot of weird, you see it in a lot of times the podcast space where it's like a lot of scammy stuff. Yeah. Where it's like, there's like supplements that people have pushed in their podcasts and their stuff that's complete bunk garbage, but they push it anyway. Me and Eugene have, granted, we might have supplements that we like, that we believe in, that you don't, but nonetheless, they're supplements we use. So, take that for what you will. I really like Epic Roll stuff. And so I'm offering it to you, not as like, hey, get this because they're paying me kind of thing. It's like, I use their stuff. I get my rash guards for me and my gym made through them. The new Jiu-Jitsu rash guards that are going to be launching next week. Well, at the time of recording, this will be Friday. So on Friday, March 28th, I'll be releasing the new set of Jiu-Jitsu rash guards. We've got some really cool ones. I hope you guys like them. And when they release, they'll be made by Epic Roll, because again, they make really good stuff. I like the quality of it, and I think they do a good job of delivering. So if you guys want to check them out, though, anytime to look at their stuff, you can go to their website at epicrollbjj.com, and the promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order on whatever it is, whether it's a t-shirt, rash guard, shorts, gis, whatever it might be.
Chewy, where can people get the Jiu-Jitsu rash guards?
If they want to get the Jiu-Jitsu rash guards, if you go to my website, if you go to, first off, you go to my Instagram or my YouTube, you'll probably find a post or a video or whatever. But if you go to, one of my websites like jujitsutraining.com, which is where I have all my instructionals, or if you go to jujitsu.net, then you'll find something. If you put in Jiu-Jitsu rash guards, you will find it. We have a little store put up for all of our gear and merch and stuff.
Sweet. I'll put I'll put a link in the show notes.
Okay, cool.
As well, we'll find that there.
Yeah, because we're going to be doing a pre-order with the rash guards. Again, I don't like to keep a ton of like extra stock. Plus, I want to make sure people get the size that they want, because we're going to open up all sizes. And so again, I don't want it to be one of those things where, hey, we order these and then, we don't have your size. Yeah. The turnaround time on these rash guards generally isn't too bad. So we should have everything to people pretty quickly. And because, we're doing it that way, I get to add maybe a little goodies into their package. So check it out when it's time. We'll be running the pre-order for about 2 weeks. So that'll run from about the 28th of March until April 11th. So check it out. Also, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by rolling over to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. When you join up, you'll get access to a bunch of different perks, including a whole library of content with hundreds of videos at this point, immediately accessible. These are everything from rolling videos, seminars that I've recorded with technical instruction, to narrated breakdowns of competitions, to Eugene giving a specific warm-up routine to Jiu-Jitsu, to guest spots with our podcast where we just have them talk about different ideas on Jiu-Jitsu, to me and Eugene talking about God knows what, and special podcast exclusive, a bunch of other stuff, bunch of other perks. But if you guys want to check them out, or check out the perks in the Patreon, go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. When you join up, it's a very inexpensive price, and you'll get access to all those perks, and you'll be supporting the podcast that you listen to each week. Also, guys, if you want to get my daily email, like my email that I've dubbed like sort of the roll longer email, right? To help you roll longer, whether that's like a longevity thing, a motivation thing, there's all kinds of ideas that I think help you stay on the mats longer. Sometimes it's more of a training specific thing. Sometimes it could be like longer in the sense of maybe your diet's better, so therefore you can last longer on the mat, whatever it might be, right? That has a sort of a longer can mean different things to different people. But the ideas of the newsletter that I send out daily has everything from specific ideas on lifting and training, to diet ideas that have been useful to me or that have been useful to my coaches, to books that I'm reading, and I'll share excerpts and quotes from things that I think are really impactful. I was sharing one from Dan Gable the other day from one of his books that I was reading, and making some recommendations to just anything and everything that I think might be useful to you. And when you join up on the daily newsletter that I send out, the daily email that I send out, you'll then get access to a free ebook that I give away, which goes into focused training ideas. So, when it comes to training in jiu-jitsu, the first step is to get in the door and be consistent, to be the kind of person that doesn't skip training. That's sort of like step number one to success in jiu-jitsu. One of the more important steps after that is, once you're training, is to become very focused on specifics at different periods of time. If you want to get better at something, you simply can't just go into the gym and just sort of like haphazardly roll. You'll get to a point doing that. But if you actually want to get really good at jiu-jitsu, and you want to do so with a limited amount of time, which is most people when they're training, they don't live in gyms, they have like other life obligations, then you need to walk into the gym and you need to know what you're doing and what kind of sort of focus you're having. And, your coach hopefully places some kind of restrictions and constraints on you during your rolling with situational rolling or drilling, whatever you want to call it. But if they don't, then you can do it yourself. And in the book, I give you 12 different strategies that I think could be really useful to you. These are things that I've used over the years. These are things that I do through drilling that I have for my students where we do live drills. And you can implement them on your open rolls. So if all you have is open mats and open rolls, you can still include a lot of focus, and I'll give you ideas on how to do that. It also includes a video. So if you want to get that all for free, check it out at my website, jiu-jitsu.net/join. And guys, with that said, let's jump into this podcast with AJ and talk about women in jiu-jitsu, and also talk about our role model camps and the cool stuff they're doing. So how have your role model camps been going on? When did you start those?
So we actually started in 2015 out of our gym at the time. Like, I think we probably had like 50 women, the first one, 40 to 50. And it was just like my friends coming to teach. So
Sure.
Rachel Casillas came and taught. She was a brown belt at the time. Julie Kedzie came and taught, like it was just my friends.
Yeah.
And we've grown from there. So we're about to do our 12th camp, which it's our 10th year, but we did 2 camps 1 year.
So how many people are you? So you got 50 at the first one, which is still a pretty good, like all women's camp.
Yeah.
How many people are typically coming to the camps now?
So now we have about 250 women there.
Wow.
So it kind of like the evolution was basically in 2019, we had Emily Kwok come out. And I think that kind of helped us like explode basically. So we ended up with 160 women at that camp, and we moved it to like a high school gymnasium. And then
I remember seeing that one.
Yeah. So then I just kind of started being like, I want this to be more of like a immersion and kind of a conference, more than just jiu-jitsu. So in 2020, we moved to a convention hotel.
How did that go in 2020?
Well, we had to move the date. So our first date was supposed to be like the beginning of May, which obviously wasn't a good time.
Sure.
So we moved it to August, and we still ended up with 160 women there.
Yeah.
So it was a good, like we gave everybody like armbands, like red, green, and yellow. So basically it was like, do whatever, I don't care. Or like red was like, I'm going to drill solo by myself. Like, don't touch me, don't talk to me. We live streamed all of it so that if people wanted to do it from their living rooms, they could. So we just tried to do as much as we could to like make it comfortable for everyone.
Yeah, make comfortable with whatever you felt with at the time, right? Because some people at that point were fine and to train, and other people were still very cautious.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Can you share like the thought process, kind of like what you felt the need was to start a camp like that, and then also the growth of it, if it was surprising to you, but also some of the things outside of jiu-jitsu that you're incorporating in to make it a unique experience?
Yeah. So I went to Rachel Casillas' camp first. I think it was in 2014. And I was just like, I want to bring this to Indianapolis. Like at the time, it didn't feel like people were traveling as much. And I was like, I want to do something like this in Indy and just try to get some girls together to just train just us. I ran a women's only class already. I started that in 2013. So that was an easy start to bringing girls to camp. And like Rachel brought up a team. And so, it was just kind of, it didn't even have a name at the time. But as it grew, we wanted it to be more about community in general. So community is our overriding goal. Aside from that, like we wanted it to be more than jiu-jitsu. So like on Friday, we do sit down workshops that are like nutrition, strength and conditioning, injury prevention or recovery, pelvic health. Like we do all kinds of different subjects every year. We usually have about 4 speakers. And then I do a couple like breakout sessions for like gym owners and gear owners and stuff like that. So that's some of the stuff we do. I also, it's important to me that if you have a stage, you do something with it, right? Like you have a voice. So we collect a whole bunch of stuff for a local women and children's shelter. We also raise a lot of money for Alzheimer's Foundation. So if you don't know, my coach Rachel has young onset Alzheimer's.
I know a little bit about it. I remember talking to one of the guys at the Master Worlds this year telling me about it, which I was really bummed to hear.
Yeah, she's doing really well. Like it's definitely a very scary process. And there's definitely, things people notice, or she notices, of course. But all in all, she's doing really well. Like every year, she's taught at all our camps. So this will be her 12th indie base camp. And every year it's like, let's wait until the spring to make sure you're good to teach again. So.
Yeah.
But we raise a lot of money for the Alzheimer's Foundation. We like raffle off some show your old geese. We have a lip sync battle that people don't vote with their dollars. And like, yeah.
So yeah, been making it both, obviously we come together for this one common thing, jiu-jitsu, but then there, I think for most of us, I think like for not most people that train, right? Like you come in for the skills of jiu-jitsu, but then what gets you to stick a lot of times is the group of people, the community that you're around.
Yeah.
And then as we all know, a lot of times that tends to, we share a lot of information. So, it's a beautiful thing to be able to say, well, we're coming here for jiu-jitsu, but we have all these other things that we could talk about that could be related to jiu-jitsu, or it could be, for in your case, in that situation, could be related to like you were talking about pelvic health with like women's issues and stuff that they need to think about and consider that are a lot of times under discussed in the general sort of population. And
like first of all, every year when people come to camp, they're like, I was burnt out, I was thinking about quitting, it reinvigorates them. So that's one thing. But also like there are people that I talk to all the time that are like, even right now, I would quit jiu-jitsu if it weren't for role models. Like they're like, because their gym isn't what they want it to be, and there's not another good place for them to train, or, works hard, whatever. But they're like, I can't imagine not being a part of this community. And not like we would be like, you don't do jiu-jitsu, let's never talk again.
Sure, of course.
But I do think it's like a really cool thing that like, not only does it bring people into jiu-jitsu, but it keeps people in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. I think I've experienced that stuff before as well, where like I think there's a real value in getting out of whatever your little bubble is sometimes and taking a trip and seeing something else. I remember hearing a speech by Dan Gable, and he was talking about like he said in wrestling, escape is worth 1 point. In jiu-jitsu, there is no points for escapes, but he said, sometimes in your life, the best thing is to go escape, depending on whatever the situation is. It could be a relationship. It could just be a situation where you need to get away to like actually look at things and see them for what they are, right? Because sometimes we're too close to the tree to see the forest kind of idea. And so I think I've had that experience as well, where people come and train and they'll say, man, like I did a camp with me or something, and they had the camp kind of same thing. They're like, man, like it was so good to have a different perspective on things, and you're around this different environment of people, and it can invigorate you.
Yeah.
As far as the challenges for women, right? Like, because you were saying that like women are in, they're struggling in their gyms, and so they stick around because they get a lot from you guys, but at the same time, when they go back home, they're not really enjoying the experience as much. What are maybe some challenges that you see that women a lot of times experience? Because I imagine there's probably some trends or commonalities to it. What are some challenges that you see women have just in general with jiu-jitsu, or a lot of gyms that you've seen?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's the issue of like sliding into DMs kind of thing, right? Like,
yeah.
We like at our gym forever, we didn't make it a rule that coaches couldn't date students, because we wanted the student to be able to tell us and not like feel like they were hiding it.
Yeah.
I think that can cause a lot of issues. So obviously, there's that issue. We actually fired a coach because he was hitting on the girls, and I was like, you got to go. Also, like worrying about getting hurt, those kind of things. If you go into a gym, and I mean, I've been in gyms where like everybody just changes out in the open, like give the women a locker room, right? I went to a gym in LA, and the guys have this like huge locker room with showers and everything. The girls' locker room was like upstairs down this hall, and it was a closet where they keep their cleaning stuff, right? I'm like, I don't think they want women here. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel like a welcoming environment. And I think, cattiness can be a problem at some gyms.
Sure.
So I think women learning to like work together. Our rash guards for the first several years we made rash guards all said, not your competition. And we talked a lot about like, we may compete against each other on the mat, but we don't compete against each other in life. Like you getting a stripe doesn't affect me, or, you getting your next belt, you winning the division, that does not affect me. So we try really hard to help women build each other up rather than be in competition with each other.
do you find that sometimes like women in groups have trouble, like sort of, I guess maybe looking at it that way?
I think when you get around a bunch of women who don't, it's easier.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Like, if that's just kind of the culture that you came up in where
Oh.
everybody's out for themselves, then that just makes sense. But
Mm.
when, again, like you said, you get outside of the normal perspective and you realize that you can be a part of a community, it's kind of, you know, gyms that don't allow cross training, right?
Mhm.
Like they want to keep very to themselves. They don't want to show their secrets, whatever.
Yeah. Very possessive. Yeah.
Exactly. But when you get out and see other things, you realize what the world can be.
Yeah, kind of a leadership thing, right? Like where you have a, you know, whatever the leadership is and sort of sets the tone for the rest of everyone else, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I know what you mean about like the, you know, it's like, what is it? I don't know if it's true or not, but like, you know, if you give like a goldfish, like, you know, a little bowl, then the goldfish will stay kind of small. If you give it a bigger bowl, it gets bigger, right? I don't know if that's true, but that's what, you know, I've heard before. And then, you know, with like sort of female, like at least it's been my experience in our gym, right? That like, you know, if they have a locker room to themselves, that's like you said, not some sort of like shammed closet over in the corner. If they have if they have their own class times or even their own space, so to speak, that says like, hey, like, you know, here you are, right? Because obviously we know that, you know, for women versus say men, I think in a lot of times, not to say that there's not always obstacles for both parties, it's generally a harder, it's a bigger barrier to entry for women coming into grappling, where you're doing this really intense physical wrestling sport where we're sweating all over each other and stuff. It's very unnatural to most women. And whereas guys, a lot of times we're encouraged to do it from a younger age. It's changing now, I think, with a lot of like there's a lot more women wrestling and stuff like that. So it's becoming more normalized. But, you know, for a long time, it's like guys wrestle, women don't wrestle, whatever.
Yeah.
And so you got to kind of like give them space to where they can kind of get into this and say, okay, I am welcomed here and here's my class. And then eventually they make it into the co-ed classes and everything else. And it's fine.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
so.
absolutely. And I know so many women that are like, I would have never started jiu-jitsu if it weren't for the fact that there was a women's only class. Even if they came in and just did one and then instantly they were doing the co-ed classes because they felt so comfortable.
Yeah.
Great. But they wouldn't have stepped in the door without that women's only class led by a woman, right? Like there are a lot of gyms where there's a guy teaching and it's not, like you said, you know, you have a room full of women, you introduce a man and it's just different.
Well, sure. I mean, I remember like I did our very first women's only class because I was just doing it at that time and gave them space. And then I remember it was like after the class was over, I kind of just stepped out. I'm like, you guys just hang out with each other for a little while. I'm gone. Like, see you later. I did the technique. We did the rolling. Now goodbye. You know, and I just noticed that now it's the bond with a lot of the women. We have a female black belt who's been running our classes and does a good job. And she, like, you can just tell it's like it's a different environment for them. They bond a little bit differently because, again, you take a bunch of men like to hang out together and then you throw one woman into the mix. Just changes the dynamic. You take a group of women and you take one guy, just pop them in there, it changes the dynamic. You know, it just is what it is. So I think giving people, like, you know, like you said, that space where you guys can go talk about whatever it is that you guys want to talk about, that you uniquely understand each other, that, like, you know, me, I just wouldn't understand and wouldn't be able to relate to. And I think it allows them to, and even with technical stuff, like women's bodies move a little differently, and not always, but just generally speaking, right? Like you know, a lot of the women that train, like you think about Carolee, Kata, Julia, their hips move in such a weird way that, like, a move that I could use pretty easily on a guy, even a smaller guy, when I try to use it on them, their hips just move around in a different space. And it's like, it's a different thing. So having even like the details that come from a woman that they understand uniquely is for them is important.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's also important to normalize women being at the head of the classroom, right? Like not just in a women's only class, but in co-ed classes as well. Like kind of showing that their future could be running the gym or teaching classes or anything like that.
Yeah, you see, I mean, we've got Kata, who's a black belt, very, very technical, very good, and she's run classes before. Carolee has as well. I was running. Yeah, she's awesome. She's one of our brown belts. That is now she's moving, but she was fun. Like, I mean, she's a great role, tough, very, very tough, and it's just good. And I think like having more women in the co-ed classes, I mean, that promotes it just promotes a different, like, women will feel like more like it's same thing with kids. Like if we have some kids or some younger kids in the classes, more kids will show up to like the adult class if they're starting to get to that level.
Yeah, like the teenagers and
yeah,
stuff.
the
Right.
teenagers
To
exactly.
work together and
Well, yeah. And, you know, sometimes, like my wife has trained off and on, and like I think she feels more comfortable. Like when she doesn't mind training with the men, but like, I think she feels more comfortable doing technique. And I think size can be a thing too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, having like, most men are gonna be bigger for the most part, but like size and just strength too. I mean, I think there's just some differences, and I think seeing people that are like you, I think makes it more comfortable. I think, it's simple as that,
representation matters, right? Like seeing people that you can see in yourself. Like a regular social media post that I will make is just like a picture of a group of us to be like, this is a stay-at-home mom. This is a 70-year-old retired teacher. This is, and I'm like talking about all the different people. So you can be like, because constantly people say, oh, I couldn't do it. Right. And I'm like, you could. I wasn't a fighter growing up, like that wasn't how I got into this. So it's important for people to be able to see themselves on the mat.
Right. 100%. Right. Because if we see people, this is the way humans are, right? Like we look around and we say, well, they kind of, look like me, or they're as big as me, or they have the same sort of life experience, whatever it is, right? We sort of have some affinity for them, right? And then we say, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Right. That, for guys, like I was just reading a book that's going into just different sort of challenges and obstacles that men have. And they were talking about the need for men's elementary school teachers because of how important it is for men as little boys to have to have good role models from a young age. And they were talking about just the absence of men's elementary school teachers, right? And they were saying that one of the problems is when you just don't ever see them, right? It's like a very rare thing. And so the author, he was talking about like a strategy to help support the young boys. He's like, one of the things we should do is increase, just like we're saying, hey, let's increase, like say women in STEM fields, and to show them you can do this, to say, hey, you guys could be teachers in this place and it's completely fine and it's actually needed. But a lot of times we don't see men in those positions. And even sometimes, like from the outside perspective, people kind of go, he's a school teacher for little kids. What's wrong? Well, even though it's a need, it's something that's needed. And so I think like you said, representation is important to be able to see yourself in someone. And I think that's one of the things where, a lot of times in society, you see so much like digging at and tearing people down. It's like, I'd rather see more people just like, let's share these experiences of these people that have done all this cool stuff, so that as many people as possible get to look around and say, hey, they're like me. They came from the same neighborhood as me, or they came from the same part of the country, whatever it is. I can do this. Perfect.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful thing.
What do you think? And we kind of mentioned a few ideas as far as like not having changing rooms for women, coaches kind of hitting on the
well, it's not just the coaches, it's even the dude students. So because that's like I talked to some of my women before, and I was like, listen, if you get, because one of them I had to have a conversation one time with one of the guys. I was like, look, bro, like, you know what I mean? Like, because, for me, I can't say much. I met my wife there, and granted, like I was completely like, I did not push. I never like hit on her when she was in my gym. It just sort of happened organically because we were hanging out. But, I always tell her, look, it's, if you guys want to pursue it, that's fine. But, again, there's a point where you have to back off if they're not interested, right? Because then it becomes really uncomfortable and creepy. Right. And so, like, it's fine to chat, but don't be creepy in the DMs and sending pictures that nobody asked you to send. And so, that's just it's an issue. I don't know why the people think that's going to work. Like, it's like, you think that's going to be the Hail Mary.
Wait, let me show you this.
It's like, well, I wasn't thinking about hanging out with you at all, but I saw this picture of this thing that hangs between your legs and sold me on this thing, right?
I do think that men, so here's my theory on this. Ready? Men think like men. And we'd like, if we got a picture from a woman, be like, oh, that's awesome.
Well, yeah, because
you know what I'm saying,
right?
But it's not the same way. It's not the same way.
It's completely different.
So my question was, what are some like red flags for women? What do you think are like some other red flags? Like if a woman starts training at a gym, or she's looking for a gym, what are maybe some things keeping an eye out for?
I think so. For us, we make sure that they know consent is important when they come in the door, right? That's one of the first conversations we have with them. I don't like you have to roll with somebody if they ask you like a higher rank.
Mm.
I tell them, even if you don't want to roll with me, you don't have to. Right.
Sure.
And that's for men and women. Like, some men don't want to train with women because their wives will get mad or religious reasons or whatever. So I try to make sure across the board that's good. So I always say, you can always say no, but we are kind of, as women, raised to, be polite and not say no. So I give them other options, like, say you're going to the bathroom, or say, actually, I've got coach this round. And I was like, that could be any one of the coaches. We'll all be like, oh yeah, I forgot I have you this round. So that way they have a way to like not roll with somebody if they don't want to.
Right.
I think the stuff that's like, you have to roll, you have to, I don't know, like do things with your body that you may not be comfortable with is just, that's a red flag to me.
Okay.
I think, this is not really I guess this is a green flag more, that women always tell me if there's anything that is like pro LGBTQIA in the gym, they always feel more comfortable. Because they're always like, if you are comfortable with gay people, you're probably comfortable with women. So that's, just a little something that I think like walking in, also just like little stuff, like women are going to pay attention, and some guys too, but like, is the bathroom clean? Is, like, do you think the mats are clean? Like, are people training even with ringworm on their face, or, like stuff like that. And just, like kind of looking at the gym and the culture and like how they talk to each other and treat the students and all that kind of stuff. So, take advantage of free trials. Like, you don't have to pick the first gym you go to, like look around and see what feels like it vibes with you.
Yeah, that's important, because when you go to a gym, you're choosing like a very long-term sort of investment of time. And so you want to make sure you find a gym that you feel pretty comfortable with and it feels cool. Like everything feels all right. Yeah. Usually you can pick up on a lot of different energy pretty quickly to places. And so, I agree with that. I encourage people to like go try your free trials at gyms. And when you find one that you're like, yeah, this is it, then, then make that decision.
Yeah. And like trust is built so quickly in jiu-jitsu because our lives are basically in each other's hands, right? Like if you're choking me and I tap you, let go. So, like we kind of know that like we're going to be in very close quarters and we're going to be doing potentially dangerous moves, and not potentially, but kind of.
It's dangerous. And if people did not treat the moves with the responsibility that they should, it could be very dangerous.
Exactly. So, I want to know that if trust is going to be built quickly, there are people that I should trust. We had a guy come in recently that like has had some training, not with us. And like 3 times I caught him like tapping people after the bell. And I'm like, that's not cool, man. Like,
that's
because that's dangerous, right? Like they let their guard down and then you take the armbar or something. Like that's, you can't do that.
No, because, when that buzzer goes off, a lot of times we instinctively we relax. Our body's very tense when we're moving because you're always guarding stuff. Yep. So as soon as the bell goes off, I had a guy one time, he just wasn't thinking. He was rolling. He was just in the moment, and he started to pull my arm back pretty quickly. And I had to like yell to basically to tap fast enough, because the bell went off. I relaxed. He had a grip on my arm. And so I thought he heard the bell, which mistake on my part. Should have been like, all right, good. Like wait till he releases it. And then as soon as it was, I was like, screamed, so that's definitely a thing. Yeah. Here's a question for you as far as like challenges for women. So I talk to, answer questions and talk to women all the time. What are some challenges, right? So I can, one I see a lot of times is that, jiu-jitsu it's not a myth exactly, but it's still not 100% accurate, that it's sort of built on this, like size doesn't matter, strength doesn't matter, it's all technique. And, no matter what, strength and size, those things really do matter. And a lot of times I think I've seen it get in the way of not just women, but like smaller men, where like, they're like, why am I not able to beat these guys? My technique's getting better, but I'm whatever. And I think that it sometimes makes it can be hard, because a lot of times women have less people to test themselves against other women, which is going to be like the best litmus test possible to say, hey, like, how am I doing versus I've got this 250-pound guy, I'm 110 pounds. Yeah. Things don't work very well, right? But what are some challenges that you see women have as far as training goes? Just like, let's say they're in a good gym, good environment, but there's still challenges that they have. And what kind of things can they do to work around those challenges?
I mean, you know, like a lot of women just have the challenges of like, they're the ones that are typically in charge of meals or carting the kids around and stuff like that. So just the challenge of making yourself a priority and actually like taking the time to do class. If gyms have any ability to make a women's class at the same time as the kids class, that can be a good starter. Because, you know, you can kind of recruit the moms over to come and train and like dip their toe in. So I think that, like, you know, just and I'm not saying that men don't also have those challenges, but I think that oftentimes that falls on the women, right? We don't think that we should be a priority. Also, you know, women have the challenge in gyms where like, if it's a very small women's community in the gym, you know, there's 2 or 3 women that train, every new woman is your responsibility. Right? The men don't have that. The men just get to like train with whoever they want to. They don't have to like adopt every new person that comes in or every teenage kid, because oftentimes the women are given the teenage kid because they're closer in size.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that can be difficult to increase their own training because they're constantly in that mentor mode.
Yeah.
Not that I think that that can't be helpful. Like, I think that I'm a good instructor because I was working with new people, and like, I'm always able to kind of keep it like fresh with how hard it can be to start out.
Yeah.
But I do think that that can be a challenge for a lot of people.
Sure. Well, you know, if you're thinking, well, you get maybe a couple, like you said, you're already fighting to make it to the gym because you're taking care of your family or whatever. And then if you get there and, you know, every time you're there, you're getting stuck with the new lady or the new kid, then it really hinders your ability to train. Let's say you're training 2 days a week, right? Which is very common for many people. Then it's like, well, it's really hard for you to actually get good work in. I always took my like teenage, especially my teenage boys, I never let them pair with the women early on, because it's like, it's just it's an awkward thing, you know, like it could be, you know, because he's a teenage boy, like he doesn't like, and he's got a woman wrapped around his legs. It's like that could be very awkward for him. So let's pair him up with some dudes so he can just like we were saying, like women getting comfortable with, you know, being in a co-ed class, right? Like that's a very awkward spot for, say, a young man who's just, his hormones are starting to kick on, and hey, we're going to put you over here with this, you know, grown woman, and now you're going to be like locked up this close together. That might be pretty uncomfortable in the beginning. So like you go over with the dudes and, you know, that's fine. No big
I'd
deal.
rather you triple with a couple other guys and, you know.
That's it. That's it.
Exactly.
No problem.
Yeah. With that said, I think, you know, I kind of go both ways. Like, I realize that that's a issue that a lot of women have, that they are kind of forced into that leadership role. But I personally, like, to me, there's some sort of like obligation feeling that we get more women on the mat. Like, so at Role Model Camp, I don't really talk about this much, but we do this thing called Rise for a Role Model.
Okay.
And it's this sheet of paper that they fill out, and it has, you know, like, it starts with like, I've been nervous to get on the mat, like easy questions. It goes into some really, really deep stuff, and kind of ends with like, Jiu-Jitsu saved my life. Like, I've made some amazing friends in Jiu-Jitsu, like that kind of thing. So they're checking off everything that applies to them. We like fold it up, pass it around, and then I read each statement and someone stands up for the check mark on their sheet. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, you know, by the time it's over and we realize, you know, more than half the room has been suicidal at some point. More than half the room has had domestic violence issues or, you know, drug issues or whatever it is. And then at the end, we talk about, you know, like, Jiu-Jitsu saved my life. And really nearly everyone is crying at that point. And it's just like, look around, like, this is why it is our responsibility to bring more women onto the mat and to welcome them and to be a community, because these women, some of these women are on your team and they need you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think it's so true, you know, because a lot of times you have, like, I've done videos on this specifically talking about both women and even like, say, smaller guys, maybe in a gym with a lot of bigger guys, right? It's like a lot of times if you come in and you're one of maybe a couple, in that gym, then it's like you're essentially one of the trailblazers.
Mhm.
So it's like if you want more people like you to be there, then when they come in, you really want to bring them under the fold. So like, because since you're going to be the more experienced person, so you're like, hey, let me take you under my wing and get you to stick around, because then after you create those people, all of a sudden you have more people around you. Like I remember one of my students, Justin Court. Justin, and Justin, like for a long time was like, I mean, he's still one of our best small guys. Right. And he's very, very good. And so for a long time, though, I remember it was like whenever we would have the new guys, they would that were small, they would naturally flock to him, and he would give them like small guy details and would help them out and stuff. And so all of a sudden small guys build up. Right. And now we have like a good mixture of small, big, and everything else in between. And so I think, like you said, sometimes maybe some people maybe sort of reluctantly get put into a little bit of a leadership role, but like you said, I think if like you're one of those people, if you're like thinking to yourself, man, I wish there was more women, or I wish there was more guys my size, or whatever, then when those people come in, like take them in and help them out. So this way you can essentially over time create more training partners for yourself and have more people like you to mix it up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
AJ, why do you think, and this is everybody's unique and different, and why they start jiu-jitsu, is there maybe something you found that's like a theme for why maybe a lot of women start jiu-jitsu, and also maybe an idea about why they stay? Because for me personally, I started for one reason. I kept training for another reason, or another number of reasons. So what do you think that is for women?
I almost bet they're almost the same. So why did you start jiu-jitsu?
Me? I always did something athletic, as like played sports, and I was kind of actually curious because I watched UFC and I was just interested in it, and it's never something I thought I'd do. Actually, I never was any kind of combat or like wrestling or any kind of sports like that. So I was just curious about doing it, and so I hopped in, and I just enjoyed it.
What made you stay?
Well, jiu-jitsu is addicting to a lot of people. A lot of it, honestly, I think the theme, the main reason why I stayed, especially at my gym, because there's gyms a lot closer to where I live, but it's the community and the people. That's why I stick around. I mean, I love jiu-jitsu, obviously, but like you can do jiu-jitsu at a lot of different places. But the reason why I stay at the gym I'm at is the people that I'm close to, and I just enjoy it there.
Yeah, I think people come in for all different sorts of reasons, and sometimes that's a wave, right? Like when Ronda Rousey got big in UFC, we had a huge wave of women coming in wanting to be fighters. Right now, things are kind of in turmoil for a lot of people, and so we have a wave of people that like want self-defense. So I think it does tend to be like different. Like there's all sorts of reasons. Some people just want something active. We're going to start seeing a lot of like life after wrestling women come in, which I'm really excited about and terrified because I'm an old lady. But also
coaching role there, right? You get to be in the coaching role. Like you guys roll with the wrestler.
Yeah, you go. But I think overriding, people stay for the community. Like they really enjoy it. They don't know how to not have that as their like third space, right? Like what would they do with their lives if they didn't do jiu-jitsu? And like we have the trope that we're going to lose people at blue belt, but like I think once you get into like purple, you're not stopping. You're going to stay. Like it's the community.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's there's so many benefits to it as well, right? I mean, like the self-defense part of it, but also like getting stronger. I mean, building resiliency mentally, and I mean, I think when you do hard things, like it makes it easier to do more challenging things. And I think you can be a little bit more gritty to get through some challenges, which ultimately will come your way as as life comes along. So yeah, I mean, I think those make sense.
And I think for a lot of people, but I know I see it a lot in women, that they stop being so concerned about, what their body looks like and feeling not confident about what their body looks like, because now they know what their body is capable of.
Yeah.
And that can be so important. I remember one of my girls, she was like a college girl, and she was like, I used to always like worry about being pudgy or whatever, but now I just like walk down the sidewalk and go, I could kick her butt. I could kick her butt.
Right, because you have this confidence of what you can do versus because I mean, and that's it's there's the issues are similar but different you know, in that, like, say for instance, guys, right? Like, because we have different images marketed to us. Like a lot of times for guys, it's like this ultra macho 8-pack guy who's juiced to the gills and has no fat on him, right? And like, you know, you even look at like action figures, and there was a guy who did, it's these action figures from like the 50s up until now. And like the action figures went from being very like normal looking to all of a sudden they have like serratus muscles showing, which is typically means you're at like sub 10% body fat. You know, you're like, and so, you know, we're seeing these as a kid, this is how I'm supposed to look. And then you're like, I don't look like that. And then you get into something like wrestling, like jiu-jitsu, where you're like, well, maybe I don't look like that, but like that dude that looks like that, that's on the stage doing the bodybuilding stuff, I could kick his ass.
Yeah.
So what does it matter, right? Like
exactly.
You have function to your body. And so it gives you this confidence in what you can do, and maybe helps you appreciate that, again, we're going to look a little different. Not everybody's meant to look this way or that way, right?
Right.
What's your, would you say, like, demographics at your gym? How many like women do you have versus men at your gym?
Yeah, we're about 40% women, so we're still male dominated, but
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a good amount of women at our gym, and I think we're mostly an older clientele. Like our morning class, I call them the blue crew, mostly because most of them are blue belts, but like the youngest is like 37 years old, up to 70. So, you know, I think we do have we have a lot of kids, and then more 30 and over.
How did you like, as far as growing a program in general, but also even the women's side of things, how do you recommend a gym maybe does that or goes about doing something like that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously the things we talked about, like in the gym, right? But also give them the opportunity to, well, post them on your own social media and on your website, that kind of stuff. Like, make sure that it looks like a woman-friendly gym when you're looking at the stuff. I think posting a picture of the women after class, like just it from women's class, does more for marketing than the big group class. Like, because of that, you know, like most men are like, yeah, I could do that. And women are like, oh, okay, maybe I could do that. And then encourage, you know, women's only open mats where they invite other people from other gyms in, or like we actually have a men's only open mat at our gym too. I was like, that's fine. If you guys want to just get together, the guys, you can do that. And encouraging like social activities outside, like have them, you know, ask the black belt to like organize a dinner or something where they all go out to eat, and just that community. That's what everyone stays for. So anything you can do to help build community is going to keep people there in the long run.
Do you feel like women, this is sort of like off topic, but kind of goes to it. Do you feel like that women are better at like I've just noticed that like women do, like at least the women in our gym, they do such a good job of just organizing, like, hey, let's get together for dinner or something. You know, they like, you know, cause like they'll do it all the time. Whereas like, you know, we'll do it sometimes. But like,
said, teach us.
Well, no, it's actually, there was an interesting thing where they were talking about like when men and women get divorced, a lot of times it hurts the man, like, because they're not used to having to organize like get-togethers and stuff. Cause like the woman was organizing the get-togethers and the social functions and stuff. And then, you know, they're like whatever. And then the guy's like, hey, they're not doing that for me anymore. And they're not used to it. So it's, I didn't know if you noticed that like with your women crew, like, do you notice that like the women just have like a natural knack for doing those types of things?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm a woman, so I can only speak from that, but
well, right. Well,
yeah,
you know, obviously that would be the best, right? Like,
right.
I mean, you know, because I mean,
why we're asking.
Yeah. And like, we have one guy that tries to organize a lot of things. And most of the guys are just kind of like, why do we want to do that? I don't know. But the women, we organize anything, and like everyone's like, yes, let's do all of those things. Let's craft together, or have a pool party, or go hiking, or, you know, like they want to be involved in all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, because you've seen our group chat, like whenever we're trying to get the guys together, like, I mean, it's like, you know, you're like, hey guys, like we're shooting for like 3 months out, and like everybody's so busy. We're like, maybe we can get together, you know, that kind of thing. I think
I can't. I'm gonna have surgery. That's what we're getting a lot of now. It's like I'm having surgery that week.
I'm having surgery, and some of us are getting older. I'm having a colonoscopy.
I'm in too much pain. I'm serious. Like, this is our text message. It's like, having surgery. I'm in too much pain. I can't. You know, it's like I mean, part of it's like our crew's getting older too. Like I started in my 20s. And now, like, a lot of us are in our 40s and 50s. Some of the people that kind of really started at the gym early on. So it's like, yeah, we are getting older. And then there's responsibilities, of course, but I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
women can sometimes, like you said, they aren't good at managing
Well, and I think
stuff.
also too, maybe I wonder if it would be the same way where like if you went into like a female dominated whatever that thing is, and there's like a smaller group of dudes, and they just had to like bond together more closely because there's less of them.
Yeah.
If
Makes
maybe
sense.
that would facilitate that more because it's like there's more women, so there's a lot more opportunities to do all that stuff. Whereas then it's like, you know, with the women, a lot of times they're smaller groups of women, and so like they sort of band together because, you know, it's
Maybe closer knit.
Yeah,
I mean, you're
closer
probably
knit.
closer knit because I mean, like you said, there's smaller numbers.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
like I think there's just not, you can't like hang out with it's just you have a select group of people that maybe you feel comfortable with.
Yeah. And as like the leader of the gym, I try really hard to make sure that's not cliquey,
Mhm.
right? Like that it's not just, you know, 5 people all the time hanging out and excluding the rest of the women. Like it's you know, let's get together, all of us. Obviously, people can have friends outside of the gym,
Sure.
but I don't want it to be like, hey, just us are getting together, ignore everyone else.
Right. You have an open, you can still like have your crew, but you can still leave the open invitation to others to join, you know, for those situations, so that, you know, even if they don't decide to, they at least feel open enough that, well, the door is open for me if I want to take it.
Yeah. Also, like in talking about like building a team, particularly of women, competition is huge for us. So we have far more women compete than we do men.
Mm.
And I think that's a few things. Like it's leading from the front a little bit, right? Like Coach Risser and I are going to compete. But also like if the women came in from a self-defense aspect, I always tell them nobody's going to come after you in the gym like they're going to in a competition.
That's right.
Or if you got into jiu-jitsu for community, like you're going to meet new friends at the tournament. You know, like some of my friends, I mean, Chewy, I probably met you at a tournament to begin with, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I met you guys way back in 2004 at a competition in Louisville when you guys brought a team down back. Like it was like I was a white belt. I met you guys at the competition, and we had dinner afterwards at a little Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, I was Kentucky State champ then.
That's right.
Those are my, you know, I said it before, like my first tournament was the Ego.
Yeah.
I remember doing a couple. And my first tournament at my old gym, and then my first tournament at Derby City was one of the Egos. It was like the Kentucky this is like, I don't know, not my first one, but it was at the gym. It was the Kentucky Muscle or
2009.
something. Yeah. And it was like they had like, I guess like bodybuilding, and then they had muscle cars, and then they had just like the mats.
Yeah.
I was like,
wild.
this is it was an interesting time, right?
Yeah. It was like it was trying to be kind of like the Arnolds, but on a smaller scale.
Right.
Yeah.
It was fun.
You get more people. I mean, like I think jiu-jitsu was still growing. I mean, it's always growing, but it was significantly smaller, and so just getting more people in the venue, and probably I don't know if it's splitting costs and stuff might be, because if you're getting like a large venue, you got to be able to fill that place up and get people to show up.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. Do you think that, like, so as an example, like when say a guy comes into the gym, there typically seems to be like almost like I have like these different categories of like what brought you in here, right? Like, you know, because you've got these buckets, you know, because you say, hey, how did you hear about the gym, or what got you interested in jiu-jitsu? Talking to them as they're coming in, and you know, like there's the categorical like Joe Rogan, Jocko, maybe you could put Andy Stump in there, and a few other guys that sort of like are very, very, very popular that talk about jiu-jitsu, and they'll funnel guys right into jiu-jitsu because they hear them talking about, oh, let me go check this out. Is there anything for women that's similar to that, where like there's maybe some prominent select figures or groups or podcasts or shows or whatever that you see sort of draw women into jiu-jitsu?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Like I would love to know of something that would do that, but not that I know of.
Okay. What seems to bring most of the women into your gym? Is there anything in particular that stands out, or is it just kind of like all over the place?
It's usually some sort of social media, to be realistic. Like, me and some of the people at the gym try to stay very active in the like chatter group. So the moment somebody is saying, you know, hey, we're looking for kickboxing for our 15-year-old, or, you know, like whatever it is, then we're trying to like make sure we're replying. And we do a free 30-day trial. So a lot of people come in because they're like, in a month, I'm going to know if I like it or not.
Right.
So that really helps. And then we get out to a lot of events. So we do different booths at various like things to bring in people and like get to meet people more out and about.
Who do you think is like a inspiring right now women in jiu-jitsu or helping grow women? Like it could be, you got Fion, you got so many of these like super elite and high level women's grapplers.
Yeah,
Is there someone that you look at now, or maybe back then when you looked at, and then now who do you look at to kind of help inspire and even grow jiu-jitsu for women?
I definitely think Fion right now, like every video clip I see of her is just very like poised and very, like, I don't know, she just seems like a good person, like, and like I tell anybody that comes in, if they're looking for YouTube videos to watch, I'm always like, check out Chewy's. I've never seen him do bad jujitsu or have a bad take. So
well, I appreciate that.
I appreciate it too. It's nice to just be like, don't look at everybody. Anybody can post a video. Before that, like Michele Nicolini was like huge for me to kind of follow and learn from. Rachel Casillas, like obviously she's my coach now. She gave me my black belt and she's been one of my friends for a million years, but I think she's very inspirational. She was the #1 Master 3 in gi and no gi, which she hates no gi, a couple of years ago. And that was after her diagnosis.
Right. She's just super tough. I mean, she's so tough.
So tough. Yeah. Yeah, she's a tough, frightening woman.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because she's so small, but like, she has a presence around her, a presence about her that definitely exceeds her physical stature. I remember I met her the first time, I think it was in 2009 or 2008 when I went down to Sean's to train, and her and Ray were still down there at the time together. And I remember like just hearing her, she's like putting her gi on and she's just talking smack to the guys. I'm like, who is this little fiery little woman? And then like I watched her roll. I was like, oh Jesus, like she's tough, and I remember it was actually interesting. We went to team training one year, and she was like, Sean was doing this thing where basically we would all like sort of swap coaches. We'd be with each coach for like a half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever, we'd swap. And I remember like several of my guys that were there, they were like, man, I really liked what she showed at the seminar. They were like, there was 4 of us, right? I was one, and there was 3 other guys, and then she was one of them. It was like, they really liked what she showed, more than everything else. And so going back to that idea of like normalizing, women teaching men or women, I think it was something for some of them that were like, oh yeah, okay, we can get this from it. But yeah, she's funny. And Michele Nicolini, she's competing again. I didn't know she ever stopped competing, but I was at like No-Gi Worlds and like watched her suit up, and then she went out there and won the damn thing, no surprise. That's but awesome. She's still out there getting after it.
That's awesome. I'd love to see her compete again. Like Elena Reeves is another one. She's kind of local. She's like Dayton, Ohio area. And I just think she's such a kind person. And I've been at other camps where she's like just there as a student.
Is she a George Dragel one?
She was. I don't know if they're still under George, but yes, she was.
Okay. Yeah. I know who Elena is. Yeah.
Yeah. But she's always the first to ask questions. Like, I just love how, she's like, she's going to understand the move. She's not afraid to like look stupid or anything. And she just also has like really good takes. Like, I think that she's a real light in jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. It's cool to, like, do you think women's, like, is that like the demographic you feel like has exploded the most, has grown the most? If you have to look at, I don't know what, obviously, like, I think that everybody's getting into jiu-jitsu nowadays, but like, do you think that's the demographic that's grown the most?
I think so. I've owned a gym for 25 years now. So, there were the first decade, I was the only woman on the mat. Like I'd have like one other training partner. I'd be like, I better get out there and train because there's another woman here today. So I definitely think like the last 10 to 12 years, women in jiu-jitsu have really exploded.
Yeah. I've noticed it's picked up in the last handful of years in particular. It seems like there's just been way more. Like, as for us, it's like in the last, like I said, last decade, we've maintained like a certain number. And then in the last few years, it seems like it's grown even more, where there's a lot more women in the gym, which it's been interesting. Like you said, you go back 15, 20 years and there were like none.
Yeah.
There would be one that would like waltz into the gym. And then, whether because of the training environment or, sometimes because of creepy fellas. And by the way, like, just for any guys, because it's so interesting when you talk about these things, guys are sometimes kind of have bad takes on them. like, I remember I was posting on something and someone like said I was trying to be a white knight. You know what I mean? Like, are you familiar with that term?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, I'm not being a white knight. I'm like, there's just creepy's creepy, right? Like, so if you're like constantly DMing someone and they're not messaging you, you're being a creepy, desperate person, right? Like, that's what that is, right? Like, that's not about being a white knight. That's just calling people. If it was on the flip side and some woman was texting one of the guys and she kept doing it, I'd be like, hey, just chill. You're being creepy, you know,
right.
being creepy and desperate, you know, but you know, and those things definitely, you know, sort of, I've known of a few women who have left gyms because of it, where they're like, this just feels a little odd. So, but yeah, when's your next camp coming up?
Our next camp is July 11th through the 13th.
Very cool.
Where is it?
Indianapolis, Indiana. So all our big camps are there. You know, it takes a lot of stuff to put one together. So, and a lot of staff and everything. So all of our camps are here in Indy.
How long do you have to, like, when you're prepping for that camp, is it like as soon as the camp's over that year, are you already preparing for the next one, or how long does it take you to get ready for one of those?
So I'm a crazy person. I already know I already know what the theme for 26 will be.
I appreciate that.
As soon as I start you know, getting inspired, like, you know, we've been doing camps for a long time. So there's certain things that are just very streamlined.
Yeah.
So as I am done with the creative aspect of a camp, I start creating the next one. And that's really helped me not be depressed after a camp. Cause like the first few, like you'd get to Monday and you'd be so sad that it was over.
Sure.
But now, you know, I'm instantly planning the next one and already making notes of everything we want to improve and all of that.
Yeah, because after like a really powerful experience with a bunch of people, this could be competition, a immersion camp, or whatever. There definitely is almost there's like a letdown / like you're coming off of a high that, you know, sometimes you get done and you're just kind of, you're in a funk afterwards for a day or two. Because, you know, it's a real thing. Yeah,
it definitely is. And so like, I think last year, maybe the year before, we started selling the following year's camp at camp, because like the anticipation is part of the thrill of it. So if you don't want to be depressed when you go home on Monday, let's just start planning what we're doing next year. So
very cool.
As far as like tournaments go, you said like, you know, importance of competing, and I saw you at the Louisville. Do you travel to most of the Jiu-Jitsu opens, or?
That was our first Jiu-Jitsu open. Awesome. So yeah, we loved it. I think because we only had women competing there. We had some of our guys there watching, but like only women were competing. Yeah. And I think the like Madison bracketing, where it's not a weight class, because like so many tournaments for women, it's like 155 and under or over. Yeah. That's it. Like I remember doing one in Chicago where it was 135 over and under. Like, so I really like that it was paired up basically by the 4 closest people to you. So that was our first one. So we're excited to do others for sure.
Yeah. Whenever you go to the regional tournaments, I mean, this is true for like men and women, depending on the situations. Obviously, if you're like 160 or 180 pound dude, you'll have plenty of people usually. Yeah. But sometimes at the ends of the spectrum, sometimes not so much. But especially for women, you know, when you have like a weight class, sometimes it's like you'll have like, you know, well, you can go up this weight class and you get sandwiched in with some person that's much larger than you, or you have nobody, or, you know, sometimes when you can just simply just adjust it a little bit, we can pair these 5 people up, these 5 people, and everybody can get lots of matches. Cause I think that's sometimes the rub with competitions like in jiu-jitsu is it's just hard to get a lot of experience. Yeah. You know, like to get a lot of matches, and, you know, whereas in like wrestling, you got competitions going on constantly, but in a jiu-jitsu competition, it's not uncommon to, you know, go in and, you know, you pay your $125 or, you know, whatever, and you have one match, you lose for whatever reason, and that's it.
That's it.
You know?
Yep. Yeah.
That's it. You know, and it's rough. So whereas like, you know, at least of a Madison bracketing and a round robin, you at least get a good amount of matches. And so even if you lose a bunch of them, at least you got a lot more experience that you would have gotten otherwise.
Yeah. And I like the rule set. It was just a little more open than a lot of the rule sets, not following the like strict IBJJF rules. And so that was fun. It was fun for some of our girls to get to, you know, play legs a little more and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they get enough matches? Do you feel like the women got more matches than probably normally than they would?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. You know, we're always trying to get more women on the mat, more women competing. So I think, you know, a couple of them had like the same girl, you know, 3 times or whatever.
Sure.
But that's going to happen, you know, like until we can bring more women in, that's part of it.
Right. And then, so for your camps, your role model camps, where can people find more information about that? And then also about your gym, where can they train with you if they'd like?
Okay. So the camp website is Roll, ROLL, modelswanted.com. We also sell gear on there, rash guards, singlets. That's my favorite thing we sell.
Nice.
And
I love singlets.
Man, I do too. It's so nice to not worry about like my rash guard coming up or my pants falling down.
You got one piece.
Exactly. And then our gym is in Greenwood, Indiana. It's just south of Indianapolis. It's also called Role Model Grappling. We're actually doing a role model week coming up April 21st through the 24th, where we have people coming in from all over. People are always like, I should just come spend a week with you and train. And so we decided to make it a thing and bring everybody in at once. And we have several different black belts teaching every class, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's super cool.
Very awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time. Appreciate you hanging out with us. And
Thank you, guys.
Is there anything else you want to, if people are listening, is there anything else you want to throw out? Like how can they find you? Like if you're like social media stuff or whatever?
Yeah, I'm AJ Clingerman everywhere they go. And when they're done listening to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, they can check me out on Beauty and the Gi, where I have a podcast with my co-host, Jen Eads.
Very cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, AJ, thank you so much for being on with us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Hopefully you guys had a good time, enjoyed it, and got something from it. For any of the men that are listening here, I encourage you guys, if you want a cool book to check out, there's some ideas in the book that I don't necessarily like or agree with necessarily, but overall, I think it was a good message. Of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves, I think is the guy's name. Let me double check here for you. It was a good book. I enjoyed it. Gave me some really useful ideas to think about, and again, sort of highlights the idea. Richard Reeves highlights the ideas of how you can support like young men in society without sort of feeling like you have to take away from women, right? Because I feel like that's where like the sort of the myopic view that people have is like, to give to one is to take away from the other, when it's like, no, there's different paths that we can choose. And so if you're like listening just because you're a guy, and we just got done talking to women, and I know most of our listenership is a bunch of dudes. I think that I've looked at the analytics of my stuff, and it's like 90%. 90% guys of the age of about 30 to 45. And then there's still a good portion of women, right? But it's about 10%. So again, if you're a fellow listening and you want a cool book to check out, that just want to recommend that one again, because I mentioned it at the beginning of the series, or the beginning of the podcast. And again, if you're a woman that's listening to it, I would definitely encourage you to check out her Role Models Camp. I think it's super cool what she's doing there. And she started it, like I said, 10 years ago, roughly. I remember seeing like the first ones popping up, and I remember like seeing the one in 2019 she was talking about where it just blew up, and seeing pictures of it. I'm like, this is nuts, right? And, I can't stress again, we talked about this on the podcast, but how important just a little bit of an escape from your normal routine can be. I've talked about this on the podcast where, I travel a bit now, so I kind of get these anyway. But back when I didn't travel as much, I would still travel about once a year by myself just to get away from everything.
Yeah.
Just to have a little bit of breathing room so I could, take a step back, appreciate everything I do have. Because once you get a little space, you can appreciate what you have. Like, I think you'd agree with this. Like sometimes you get away from your kids for a few days, and damn, you miss them.
Oh yeah.
Or if you're in a situation where you're away from your wife and kid, man, you're like, man, I want to be home.
Yeah.
And so it's a beautiful thing, because you come home with a renewed sense of like, oh yeah, I now I know why, like when you're frustrated and you're enduring this, like, this is why I'm doing it, because of how much I love them, whatever.
Yeah.
But also with your training, right? It's the same thing. Sometimes like it can be very easy to take it for granted because it's just your normal thing, and also too, like sometimes having new styles, being exposed to new styles and new techniques and new perspectives can inject you with a little bit of excitement or vigor, and you can go back and say, oh, I want to go do this. And so if you're a woman listening to this, check out the camp. It could be definitely a beneficial thing for you. If you want to support the podcast, you can check out our sponsors, Charlotte's Web, charlottesweb.com. They are one of the premier CBD companies out there. They're one of the OGs. It's been around from the beginning, as far as I can tell, as far as the CBD market is concerned. Really cool company with what they do. They have a lot of different products, everything from CBD, CBN products, different cannabinoids. They also have functional mushrooms like reishi and lion's mane, which I like those products. They gave us they periodically give us some stuff, and I feel like I get a bump from the Lion's Mane ones. Like,
is that the energy one?
It's the focus one.
The focus one.
Yeah. So like whenever I'm like getting ready to like dial in for a little bit, I usually have the Lion's Mane gummies. I've been using them, like I'll use them for, a couple days in a row or whatever, but I feel like I get something from them positively. And, again, I think there's always studies that sort of go back and forth between what does it work, does not work, whatever. Sure. But I like to try stuff out, and experiment. And so I like their stuff. If you guys want to check them out, charlesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu30. I share this with you at the beginning of the podcast. Sometimes people skip over it, so I'll share it on the end. A lot of podcasts, a lot of different things, they share stuff they don't use. I actually use the products here. So anything that is on this podcast that we should talk about is something that Eugene and I actually use or feel comfortable sharing with you. Because it's changed over the years, but we've had lots of different stuff come our way that we're like, this isn't good. Yep. Everything from like supplements and powders and stuff like that, stuff that people are selling in overpriced testosterone boosters and stuff that I think is basically just fleecing people of money with really overpriced garbage. And so again, anything that I use in this or anything I share is something I use and I feel comfortable sharing with you, whether you're my student in the gym, who I'm going to see every day and whom I don't want to lie to, who might be at my house for the bonfire or something, I don't want to lie to you, or if you're online and I may never see your face ever, right? But either way, I want to take care of you. I like their stuff. So check them out, charlesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu30. Also, Epic Roll is a great company. I like their stuff. They make everything from rash guards and shorts and gis to joggers, shirts, fanny packs, whatever, right? Anything that you're looking for jiu-jitsu related, they have something for. They've got great designs, cool quality stuff. If you want to check them out, go to their website at epicrollbjj.com, and the promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order. Also, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly and get access to a bunch of other perks, you can check us out, our Patreon, patreon.com/the Chewjitsu Podcast. And, when you join up as a Patreon member, you'll get some different perks, things like that. And on top of that, you'll be supporting the podcast. And we have some different things that you can look at. So if you're curious about it, just go to the website, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. And when you look at the website, it'll tell you about the different perks. And you can see, well, I'm interested in this, or whatever, and then kind of go from there and make a decision for yourself. Also, guys, if you would like to get my daily email that I send to what I lovingly call my Chew Crew, you can do so by going to my website, chujitsu.net/join. When you join up, you'll get access to my daily email, my Roll Longer email, where I give you tips that could be useful, from the actual specific training tips, everything from here's something that it could be useful to adding to your next rolling session. Here's some lifting ideas for lifting more, like for longevity or for more performance, or here's a diet thing. Like one time I shared, a specific meal or set of meals that I like to, be able to train in like 45 minutes after eating, where I don't feel heavy, right? And some tricks that I've learned over the years. Then everything else that goes into my stuff. Again, a lot of you guys listen to me, and you probably know that I have, I read a lot of books, and there's a lot of things that I like sharing from those. And so I list, a lot of times I'll share different books I'm reading, different ideas from those books, quotes, or even sometimes I'll just have like a roundup of like 10 books that I've read in the last year or, last few months that I think could be useful to you or worth reading. And so anyway, that said, if you guys want to get that and my Focus Jiu-Jitsu ebook that I give away for free when you join up, which will tell you 12 different strategies to add specific focus training to your rolling during your open mats and your open training sessions, then go to my website, chujitsu.net/join, and you'll join up and get access to all that. So guys, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you as always. We'll talk to you next week.